Hi everyone, I'm Tess from the Indian BlockPrint company and I'm here with your January subscription box project. So hopefully you had a lovely Christmas and New Year and you're ready to get creative. This is a lovely project to keep you entertained during January, which can be a little bit cold and a little bit January blues can creep in. So hopefully this subscription box project will cheer you up. So I'm going to be showing you today how to print this gorgeous organic fringe scarf in a really lovely Indian floral repeat pattern. This is quite new for us, this project. It's not something we've done before on our subscription boxes. It's a little bit more technical, so it might involve a little bit more practice on your end, but it's definitely going to be worth it. So let me show you what's in your box this month. So you've got your lovely printed postcard, which has got the link to this video on, which is hopefully how you found this video. And it's got all the items that are included in your box. But also the postcard is just lovely to keep pinned up on your wall. You've got two fabric paints. You've got Indian Aqua and Leafy Green. These are the paints we're going to be using for today's project. If you've got something else at home, you can always swap and change and do a different colour combination. You've got two square sponges. You've got your organic fringe scarf. Now you don't need to pre-wash this or anything, but you will need to iron it before you start printing. And then you've got your lovely Indian floral border. So this is the printing block we're going to be using. Now make sure you give this a wash with hot soapy water before we get printing. And any extra equipment that you might need, I think it might be useful to have a roll of masking tape. I've got a sheet of paper or card, and I've got my foam printing mat. So other than that, you don't need anything else special. So I'm going to change my desk around and we're going to get printing. So I've got my table all set up for printing. It's the same setup as we always have. I've got my foam mat underneath me, my paint tray. I've got some plain white cotton, which we're going to be practicing on first. And then I've got my rag for cleaning my block. And as always, make sure you give your printing block a good wash with hot soapy water. You just remove any of the dirt and the oils from the surface which might affect your printing, but also you want to kind of start wearing off this white layer of paint which is on the block. And as you may know, it's only on there so that we can see the design really clearly, but it can affect your printing sometimes. So we find that as it starts to wear off, it actually gets better and better. Now, we're going to just do a couple of test prints just to make sure it's printing well, and then we're going to move on to having a look at the repeat and really building the pattern, just so that we know exactly how the block works and how it prints before we move on to our item. Now, the reason I gave you square sponges in this box is it's actually easier because I'm just going to do the whole bottom half green and then the whole top half blue. So having the straight edge of the sponge made that really easy. So I'm going to do up to the bottom, up to the top of the first leaves, green, and then the next half I'm going to do blue. So I'll show you more of that in a minute. So I'm just going to dip my sponge in the paint. I'm going to get my sponges loaded up, and you've got this lovely leafy green and Indian Aqua, but you could always swap the colours if you've got something different at home. So I'm just going to go straight along, just using the edge of my sponge as my nice sharp edge. Then I'm going to turn it over and I'm going to do the top half blue. If you have got sponge dabbers at home from one of our previous boxes, you can use that if you'd like. Might be worth trying both, but I found that the square sponges were easier for this project. So there we go, that's come out really lovely. Hopefully you can see that there. So we'll just do a couple of test prints, just making sure that the block is printing well. If there's any parts that aren't coming out too well, then you know what to work on. And if it looks like it might need a little bit more of a wash, then you can always do that. There we go. Now for this project, I'm going to be working from the bottom and going up. Now the reason for that is because of the spacing on the scarf. If I start at the bottom, I know exactly where I'm going to end up at the top. If I start at the top and work my way down, you might end up falling off the bottom of the scarf. Now if you prefer working from top down, then that's absolutely fine, but just see how you feel. So I've got a little bit of practice here, so we're just going to have a little go at working on the repeat. So I've got a hemmed edge here. This is just some scrap bed sheets. So I'm going to use that as my straight line at the bottom. And I'm just going to print a couple along the bottom. and we'll have a look at how this block repeats. It's very easy actually, just need to get the hang of it. So again, I'm using the bottom row, so all these end pieces, I'm going to match them up along the bottom of my fabric. Now, if you find it difficult to put the whole block down at once, what you can do is just drop one corner down first and have it as like a pivot point, and then you can line the rest up, if that makes sense. So I'm just going to touch the bottom left-hand corner down, and then I can move it round and I can twist it to make it straight. So I'm going to allow the bottom of the block to follow my hemmed edge, and I'm going to put it down slowly, give it a wiggle, and up. So you can see all of those are sitting really nicely along the bottom. Now, it doesn't matter if they're not perfectly straight. As you know, it's handmade, it's not meant to be perfect, but that's just a really good trick to try and help you get as straight as possible. So now, when I lay this next one down, again, I've got to line it up perfectly, or as perfect as I can. Now, I'm just going to mimic the space which is in between the designs on the block. So it's about a finger width, you know, just under a centimetre. So when I put this block down, I'm going to do the same again. I'm just going to touch my bottom left-hand corner down first, okay? Sometimes it's a lot of pressure to line the whole block up at once because you're looking at spacing and being straight. So just do one at a time to make it easier for yourself. So bottom left-hand corner, I'm going to place it down next to the other one. I'm mimicking the spacing, so about just under a centimetre. So I've touched the block down, and again, I've got this slight pivot point, and then I can allow the rest of the block to line up and follow. See there? So I hopefully can fit one more in. If I go off the edge slightly, it doesn't matter. The paint's just going to end up on my mat. So again, bottom left-hand corner touch down, mimicking the spacing, and then allowing the rest of the block to follow. And that's great. Now, you could print this block just straight away again above, but it would leave a slight gap. The way we've designed this to do is to interlock. So you can see here, the tops, there's a bit of a gap in between each flower. Well, your stem is going to go in between there, okay? So you slightly offset it from your previous print, if that makes sense. So that would be straight. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shift it to the right slightly and then down so that the stalks fit in the gaps. Now, again, it will take a couple of prints because your first ones might be too close, your next ones might be too far away. So you've got to learn how the block prints. So that's why it's really good to have this practice. So, right, I'm lining them above, directly above. I'm shifting it to the right and I'm dropping it down slightly. And I'm going to put my bottom left-hand corner down first and allow the rest to follow. Like that. Now, mine is not even perfectly straight. It's slightly wonky, it's slightly tilting up. But now I know that I was slightly tilting up last time. So when I do it this time, I'll just be aware that I was slightly high on the right-hand side. So just to drop it down slightly. So I'm bottom left, and then I'm bringing the block down slightly on the right-hand side, and then up. So that one was much straighter. Hopefully you can see that. But that's what you want to practice. That's the pattern we're going to be doing. So you're just going to be practicing that, you know, do it several times until you're feeling really confident with it. And then again, bottom left down and allowing the rest to follow. The thing with the printing blocks is that they're not always symmetrical. The carvers don't always carve them so they're perfect on each side. You know, this block is probably slightly off center as well. And that's just the way that the blocks are made. So you've just got to, you know, take account for that. So I'm the next row ahead again. I'm actually going directly above the first row I did. That's how the pattern goes. So you slightly offset the second one. So I'm now going back on top, and I'm allowing the rest of my block to follow once I put the first corner down. I think because it's a lovely overall design, you're not even going to matter if it, you know, you're not even going to notice, or it's going to matter if it's slightly off. You're just going to practice until you're happy with what the results are that you're getting. And also this is a scarf that we're printing on, so you're never going to wear it perfectly straight. So if they are slightly wonky and things, that's why a scarf is really great, because it's very forgiving, because it's going to be floating around, you know, when you're wearing it. No one's going to see how it's perfectly lined up. So there we go. That's what you want to be looking for with your initial practices. And you want to be getting something similar to me, making sure that the blocks are interlocking with each other and that you're getting them as straight as possible. And you're just going to practice that a few times, and then when you're feeling confident you can move on to the next step. But I'm going to move on to our scarf now and show you how that's done. So I've got my foam mat here. I've got a few prints that have come onto the edge, so I might flip it over to the other side. Now, something you might find handy with this project, which I said, is maybe a piece of paper. Now, the scarf is quite thin, so the paint might go through and onto your mat. So just by having a piece of paper on there, that might save your mat from getting a little bit dirty. And I have ironed my scarf. That's really important because they can be very creased. It's a very nice material, but quite thin. And this is an organic fringed scarf. So you can see there, I might actually print without I'll see how it looks. I could always try and print without the paper, just in case you can't see it, but we'll see how we go. Now, where the tassels are at the bottom, it can be quite taut, and the fabric can, you know, be kind of pulled in. So what you want to do is you want to kind of stretch it just very gently, because it may rip, but just stretch it as much as you can, just to try and loosen that fabric. And then I always maybe don't start at the very bottom of the scarf, maybe start slightly the way up, where it's not all being gathered in. And then really important for this project is masking tape. So I'm just going to use a little bit at first, and what you're going to do is you're going to pull the scarf taut across your foam mat. So you can do it a little bit at a time, but you want to stretch it out because it's so loose it will move as you start to print it. So you really want to get it held. So I also tape over the hemmed edge so that I'm going to keep that really nice clean hemmed edge, and I don't print on the hemmed bit. So you're just going to work at getting it nice and tight. This might take a bit of time. You don't have to tape all of it. Obviously I'm only going to be printing the bottom section of both ends. You might want to go all the way up, but just pull it as taut as you can, and this will really help with the printing process. Right, there we go. So I've also taped my tassels down slightly, because that's also just helped pull the fabric straight. So that's a really important thing to take your time doing, as it's definitely going to help the printing process. So I've got my paper under my scarf, and I'm going to go. So I'm going to start at the bottom left hand corner, and I'm going to, what you can do is if your scarf isn't very straight along the bottom, what you can do is use a piece of masking tape to create a straight line. So it might be slightly higher at one end than the other, but again, you're not going to notice exactly how it's done. So I've got a straight line there, so I can see my scarf goes like quite short there, then it's a bit longer bit here, and then shorter at the top, but that's okay. But I've now got a nice straight line to print along, and that's quite important. You want a nice line to follow. So I'm going to start the left hand side, and I'm just going to put my first print down. So I'm going to put my first print down at the edge of my fabric. Like I said, I'm going to line the bottom of the first flower up where I want it to print. So I'm going to use my masking tape to line it up along the bottom, and I'm going to put that down. And then I remember I've got that pivot point, and I can allow the rest of the block to follow along the bottom of the tape. Now that paper is giving me a bit of a harder surface, so make sure you give it a good wiggle. And there we go, that's come out lovely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print this first layer all the way along the bottom, and the block might go off the edge at the end, but that's okay because we've got the tape and the paper to catch it. So again, first flower, I'm going to touch the bottom left one down, slowly, and then I've got that pivot point, allow the rest of the block to go down. Okay, I'm going to do the next couple of prints and I'll show you where I get to. Okay, now, so for this one, I'm only going to be able to fit about 2 of the flowers on there because the rest are going to go off. So what you can do is just put paint on 2 of them, just so you're not wasting paint. So I'm just going to put paint on the 2 end ones. And then I'm just going to put it down and allow the rest of the block just to go off the edge. Like that. Give it a wiggle. And then up. So you can see that it's slightly gone onto my masking tape, but that's okay. It's going to make the design look beautiful once we've finished. So now I'm on to my next layer. So I'm now going to be doing that interlocking that we spoke about. Now, if I start there, I'm going to have a little bit of a gap there. So what I might do is do my first print so it overlaps onto my masking tape. And that way I'm not going to have a gap where there's no paint. So I'm going to do it about there. And again, we're going to do exactly the same as what we did before. You're interlocking this, so the stalk is going in the gap of the flowers you've just printed. And I'm mimicking the spacing, and I'm just going to put it down 1 point down slowly, and then I'm going to be able to shift it. You have to, hopefully you can really see that. So this bottom left-hand corner touches first, and then I'm able to twist the block. Now, you don't want to twist it too much because you don't want to smudge anything, but if only that bottom point is touching, then you've got that kind of pivot, and that really allows you to then work out where the block is straight. If you're trying to put it down at once, it can be quite difficult, and then you can end up messing it up. So by having that safety point, you give yourself some flexibility. So I'm going to be looking, putting my block down, touching it down, allowing the rest of the block to be guided down, and let's see how that looks. Perfect, that looks really good. And then again, I'm going to carry on this line and we'll see where we get to at the end. Okay, so I've got to my last print. So I'm going to put this down here, and half of it's going to go off the edge, but like we did before, that's absolutely fine. So I'm mimicking the spacing, touching it down, adjusting the block and allowing it to follow down and then up. So I've done my first 2 lines. So now I'm going to follow that exact same process going up, and I'm probably going to do around 2, 4, 6, maybe 8 rows, and then I'll take that off and see if that's gone high enough for my liking or whether I need to add a few more. But you're just going to follow on that, making sure you're always got your tape on the hemmed edge so that none of your paint goes onto the hem. And I'm going to follow that line again, just keep interlocking and following the same spacing. Now you can see here it's definitely gone a little bit wonky and it's got a slightly strange gap, but that doesn't matter. Remember, it's handmade, it's not meant to be perfect. So I've printed 7 rows now and I've reached the top of my mat. So I'm just going to untape this and I'm going to move the scarf up so we can have a look at how it's looking so far. And I think you'll be able to really see once you take the tape off how neat it looks by taping the edges and then printing over the edge. You're just left with this lovely finish. So it's looking great. Let's just take this off, slowly take it off just because you don't want it to rip your fabric at all. And there we go, that's how it's looking so far. So really I would like it to go up another 2 rows, I think. So what I'll do is I'll put it back on my mat and I'm going to put my paper back underneath. You can see how much paint my paper's been catching, so that's really good. And then I'm just going to retape it onto my mat just here. Just needs 2 short bits, and then I'm going to print the last 2 lines. And there we go, my last 2 lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for this to dry, then I'm going to untape it, and then I'm going to flip it round and do exactly the same to the other end, and I'll show you how my finished scarf looks. And here is my finished hand-printed scarf. So I really hope you've enjoyed this month's project. It's been a lovely one to try with you all, and I really hope you're going to enjoy printing your scarf. It's such a lovely material to print. They make beautiful gifts or lovely to have yourself, and hopefully you can see you don't need to spend your time printing the whole scarf because you're not going to see a lot of it when you're wearing it. So just by printing both ends, you're still able to create this lovely fabric item that you've made. Now, this is a little bit more of a difficult design than we may have used over some of the past subscription boxes. So I would say it's really important that you practice with it. It's not a very big block, but the repeat pattern, it needs to be something that you learn and you practice, and you need to get to know the block to know exactly how it prints. So really make sure you have a good practice, whether that's on some scrap cotton or some paper. Before you move on to your scarf, just make sure you're feeling really confident. As always, with the fabric paint, you need to properly heat set it. So you need to iron directly on the print side of the fabric for several minutes until each print gets too hot to touch. We do have a heat setting video on our YouTube channel if you need to remind yourself of that. And then just wash your equipment up with hot soapy water, wash your block off, and then you can put them away to use again another time. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed being part of the BlockPrint Club. Thanks.